And Chris gave us brand new sheets and throw away your other ones.
And what section should we?
Well, she's gonna tell us.
I was gonna circle back on a couple things and then
The state standards.
we left off on section 20. But I was going to talk about a few things first. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to talk about, and Senator Perslick, I sent you an email about this yesterday, which totally okay if you didn't read it. In that section 2 summary section under subdivision 6, this is the one that currently has blanks in it. It says transformation of the state vehicle fleet. The Department of Buildings and General Services, which manages the state vehicle fleet, currently has XX plug-in hybrid electric vehicles and XX battery electric vehicles. Those numbers are 18 plug-in hybrid electric vehicles and 11 battery electric vehicles. So I can easily fill in those numbers on line 5. The balance of that sentence in fiscal year 2023, the Department of Buildings and General Services expects to add, and then there are blanks for plug-in hybrid and battery electric. In corresponding with BGS yesterday, they said unknown for those and unknown additional PHEVs. I asked if they could if we could say the Department of Buildings and General Services expects to add additional PHEVs and additional BEVs to the fleet. They're saying that given COVID, and you might want to hear from GS about this, so I'm just going to do a little summary. Given COVID and just vehicles not having as many miles and supply, they might not actually acquire more vehicles for the fleet. This subdivision has been in the summary section since 4 years ago. It would have been you change the requirements around the fleet, and the balance of the section also said, and there are requirements increasing the percentage makeup of the fleet. I don't know if you want to continue to include subdivision 6 in here. You could include just the first sentence saying that there are 18 PHEVs and 11 BEVs. You could say that they expect to add additional vehicles. So
they did, because they gave me those numbers. So they did give you those 18, 11.
Yeah, I got them yesterday. So that I can fill in. I just don't know if you want to keep this in here as part of your summary.
Did we establish percentages?
Yeah.
So
75% of new.
So perhaps we should try to back to the goal that we set.
Well, that's what I was going to say. We could just say the second sentence could just be kind of a reiteration of
What statute
requirement.
Yeah, I can do that.
Because it capped out this year, so maybe next year we can look at it again to see if the market shakes out and there's cars available again, we can look at it.
It's that percentage.
I think it's 75% of all new purchases to hybrids count. Doesn't even have to be a plug-in hybrid.
Yeah.
So that's not mainly how they're beating it.
What is
Yeah, I think
We're on page 7. This is in the summary section, talking about the state vehicle fleet. And the direction I have, and I will get you new language on this. I'll try and do it if you take a break this morning. Say transformation of the state vehicle fleet. The Department of Buildings and General Services, which manages the state vehicle fleet, currently has 18 plug-in hybrid electric vehicles and 11 battery electric vehicles in the state vehicle fleet. And then reference statute, which says going forward, it was post July 1 of 2021, 75% of new vehicles need to either be hybrid or plug-in electric vehicles. So instead of saying anything about what they expect to do, just reference back to the statute.
So we're not mandating.
Statute requires that, and I can pull up the statute.
Okay, but we're not doing any different then. We're not mandating.
No, not
You're
changing
changing
anything.
the percentage or anything.
Okay, because I don't want to do that.
No, and nothing in section 2 does anything other than summarize other things. So section 2 doesn't change the law in any way whatsoever. Just summarizes the white book, summarizes the T-bill, and in this case, summarizes what statute already requires.
Is this our latest, what's our latest?
It'll be draft 1.2, 12:30 p.m.
That's one they gave us yesterday in institutions.
Well, my copy.
Did you leave it in institutions? Chair?
Yeah, I did.
Want to go look?
I'll check up it now.
I'll go look if you like.
Or it got delivered.
Huh?
I'm sure his mine got delivered to appropriations.
Yeah.
That's where it is.
So that's what happened, okay.
Yeah, they brought it into us when we were in institution.
Okay.
So you'll see a revised version of subdivision 6. The second thing I wanted to loop back to is in Section 18, this is the carbon reduction program, and Chris and I worked on language that Michelle says she is good with, and I will put it up on the screen. It will be on page 32, section 18. Oh, sorry, I will do one thing before we get there. In section 15, I took out subsections D and E. That was the language that was kind of redundant.
Do what you're doing.
Did, just before we move on.
So what page? I'm
did the
sorry.
Commissioner of State Buildings, all right with the car deal, the language, you know?
We didn't put that in.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because she mentioned in her, what's the name, mentioned to us yesterday that he was concerned about some language, and I don't know what it was.
If it
I
was-
think they must be talking about that amendment that they
Okay, all right,
said they were doing it anyway.
okay, but I guess that's fine.
So
All right,
I
just so
said
get that clear. I didn't know what it
we
was.
didn't need to put something in if they were
Had a
doing
chance
it.
to look at it.
I do know it stimulated, because I had a follow-up email with VR, which is hireability, and they knew not, actually, this is all one agency, but a different department, and so I talked to Diane Delmas, who's the director, and it precipitated that connection.
Okay, all right.
So that's, we don't need to worry about it, I
Okay.
withdrew it.
All right, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. That's good
It's
to
hard to keep
circle back.
I know, I'm just getting things moving here, so it's good.
Okay, so bottom of page 32, section 18. This was what was going to require that the agency program into the white book all of the money for those multiple federal years that was available under the carbon reduction program into the white book for fiscal year 24. I'm going to change this section heading since it's now not just fiscal year 24. But this would instead say that the Agency of Transportation needs to consult with the Vermont Climate Council and ensure that within the Agency of Transportation's proposed transportation program for fiscal years 24, 25, and 26, all federal monies that are proposed by the state for expenditure under the carbon reduction program are allocated towards projects that meet the cap. So they don't need to say they're going to use all of the carbon reduction program money, but if they're going to say they're going to use it, it needs to be something that aligns with the cap, and they need to
That was
consult with the
Chris's
climate.
proposed language.
Yep, they proposed by the state for expenditure.
I think it's fine. We can close it out. You're gonna change the heading, you said?
Yep, I'm going to change on line 11, instead of it saying proposed fiscal year 2024 transportation program, I think it'll just say future fiscal year transportation program.
Proposed fiscal year.
So it'll be in the next 3 that you see. Okay. So now we are caught up. We left off after section 19 yesterday, which was the plan to update the state standards. So now we're at the Transportation Alternatives Grant Program. This is changing statute to do some cleanup and to remove some things that are outdated relating to prior fiscal years. So you'll see that being struck out in a number of places. And then going forward, the split starting in fiscal year 2024, so your next fiscal year, so they don't have to change anything in the current white book, instead of it being 1.1 million for or such lesser amount if there are fewer applications being reserved for municipalities for environmental mitigation projects relating to stormwater and highways, it'll be a 50% split. So 50% for those environmental mitigation projects and the balance going to any eligible activity. Senator Kitchell, one of the things you picked up on, so I'm just going to circle back on, is this language that says, and the balance of grant program funds shall be awarded for any eligible activity and in accordance with the priorities established in subdivision 2 of the subsection. That's not new language, it's just a move from another part. But the priorities that are established is really just one, and it's the preferential weighting to projects involving as a primary feature a bicycle or pedestrian facility. And then the degree of preferential weighting is just left to the agency in its complete discretion. So I don't know if you necessarily, maybe you want to combine the subdivisions. It would just be an extra sentence added to subdivision, what's now 1. if you want to leave it just as it is, it's current law, nothing's changing. It is, I agree with you, written in a kind of weird way. You give preferential weighting to this, but it's the only thing that is being considered and it's in your sole discretion. But it's existing law if you don't want to modify
We
existing
can't
law.
make the rule perfect, but it might make sense to just have one, all in one. I don't really care.
It can be something that I put in the T-bill next year.
So leave two then,
Yeah, we could leave it as 1 and 2.
I think that would be fine, close it out. And you could put it on your list for next year,
Yeah,
because I'm sure you,
yes, yes.
We'll start a list soon. I think Michelle has already started a file for the next T-bill. Okay, so now we've got the 3 sections, sections 21, 22, and 23 that are moving, and this is for the $50,000 for e-bikes that was in the other T-bill. You pulled out the $1 million for e-bikes in this one, but making it so that $5,000 of the money that was available for the administrative costs for replace your ride can be used for the administrative costs for e-bikes. So you've got the change in the summary section, you've got the change, and that's section 21. You've got the change in the authorization for replace your ride, that's section 22. And then you have,
that's 50. That's last year's the money we're
Yes.
referencing.
Yep.
Because the program hasn't really started.
exactly.
So just so we understand, I support taking that money out. What is our explanation for not going with e-bikes?
Because
I support it 100%, but just want to make sure we get the right, we're all on the same page.
Because we felt that what we needed to do with microtransit and public transit were higher priorities and would have longer term benefit, and so it's a matter of a priority of keeping it still within climate and carbon reduction. So we just
That's
saw,
all, we're on the same
we
page.
saw
Make sure we're all on the same
e-bikes and snow machines and ATVs as not where we put our first dollar.
page. Yes,
Transformational dollars, right? That's what we want to be, and we want to, we want to encourage
And
people.
also, you serve so many more Vermonters.
Right. And we,
It's just a handful would get.
and we know that model works. Yeah, all you gotta do is own stock in Uber or Lyft or anything like that, and that calling for a ride is the way people prefer.
So,
I just also add that they're not as expensive as I originally thought, but the other point, do we want to consider dropping the whole 50,000 already allocated? Like, if we're not going to throw another $1 million at it, how much effort have we stood up?
They've already done all the work.
I'm pretty sure we've already done all the work with the vendor to make that ready.
I wouldn't kick that.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
Michelle will get her rebate on her bike.
But that's one of the reasons not to do it. We're just starting this new program. We'll learn from that program and we'll see kind of how things are going.
Okay.
And we're also providing subsidies through Replace Your Ride.
And knowledge smart isn't the replacement. Synergy is coming up with an app, a Costco electric bike. So every time the price changes, you get an alert on your phone.
Or after you ride the bus 10 times, you get a bike or something like that.
I was there last night and the price went up, so it's back up to 350.
I bet it would be the way everything's coming in.
They don't name a bus after you, there's something wrong. Maybe that's gonna be the chicken bus.
Okay, I will put. So I think that will close out 21, 22, and 23. We are still talking in section 24 about changes to the T-bill from last year. And this is in the $1 million that was for the grant program for charges at multi-unit dwellings. So some editor changes, multi-unit being one word, not having a hyphen in it. And then the substantial change is in the language that was included in the T-bill last year. It said level 2 chargers in the section heading, but then it didn't actually in the balance of the session law say that it was limited to level 2 chargers. In getting to a position where grants are going to be made available under the program and the work they've done so far, and you've heard from Bronwyn about this, they're is an interest, and this is what Senator Ingalls and Senator Perchlik were talking about yesterday with the language that's in the big bill, and also having grants go towards level 1 chargers in addition to level 2 chargers. So this would be kind of going back in time, and for the session law, establishing that program, saying that it's for electric vehicle supply equipment, and adding a definition of electric vehicle supply equipment, having it include both level 1 chargers and the level 2 chargers. So that would be for the program that I believe the application window was closed, and they're going to start issuing grants for that past silo of money. And that tees up a question for in section E903 in the big bill, whether or not there should be language that says there should be priority given to level 2 chargers at multi-unit dwellings. And I can pull up the E903 language that I sent the two of you yesterday. I know Michelle also has some things that she would want to convey to the committee, and she sent me some links that I can share. So I will take my direction from the committee as to what you want to do there.
And I just want to make a point why I push this. You know, I know what's going to happen in my area. I know that we're going to be stuck up there with a bunch of level 1 chargers all over the place. And it's going to say, well, what do you, if we get them, at all? And I know that we're going to, you know, there's a big push to put housing in, and I support that 112%. But 20 years from now, we're going to be stuck with the level 1 chargers up there. It always happens that way. It's the way that it is. And I want to, at any time that we can get a level 1 charger, I know that we still don't have any chargers in the state or what we want to have, but they're almost to the point of being passé. They're almost.
That's a slow charge, right?
Right, that's a slow
Your
charge.
outlet.
So if we're starting
It's
new,
all night.
right, if they're starting new and they've got a project developed, I'd really like to go to level 2 at least, because I know we're gonna be stuck with level 1.
How many, is it 3? 1, 2, 3?
Yeah, 1, 2, and 3.
The second one goes along that thing.
Faster, you
Really
know,
depends on the car and how much.
right.
And number 3 is the.
It's like
Fast charge.
Right,
They're all more money to install.
Yeah, they are.
That's where it's different.
that's right, yeah,
Because even for level 2, you need to have a 220 line.
right.
Yeah, there we go, when you go from 110 to 220.
Right, and then so at least at that 220 line at that point in time,
Right, might as well do it now.
Right.
Yeah.
that's,
Well, so you want to add priority?
So it would
We're gonna
be
hear from Michelle.
in
Right,
E903, which is the language in the big bill for the $10 million that
Right,
goes to
but
ACCD.
would you put it here as well?
I don't know.
This is just definition.
this is where I picked up on it, so I don't know where, I don't really know where it should go.
So I think for purposes of the past $1 million, I think they've already really gotten close to starting to issue grants. I think it is more pertinent to the $10 million for which there hasn't been
Right,
anything. So this would be an E903 in the big bill, just adding on line 13 up on the screen, what's highlighted in green, with priority placed on level 2 EVSE at multi-unit dwellings.
I'm amenable, and I'll take it to the committee, because it's a language change in the big bill, if this is.
Michelle, go ahead.
So Senator, would it be okay if Anthea put up a link on the screen that shows the application for level 1 charging for multi-unit dwellings that we're talking about? I also had reservations about bothering to do anything with level 1 in multi-unit dwellings until I learned about new technology. And so just going back to the principle that we want most Vermonters to charge at home overnight in a slow charge environment where it costs less and you're using, less demand on the system. And so with a level 2 charger in a multi-unit dwelling setting, you can imagine somebody gets home, they plug in probably at 5 o'clock. So 5 to 9 is like your peak hours for a lot of electricity demand. Then they have to remember to go out at 9, unplug, and then somebody needs to come in and then, plug their vehicle in. So there's a lot of possibilities for a system like that not necessarily being ideal for a multi-unit place. Now, there is new technology, which Anthea will show in a minute, which basically allows in a garage setting for a landlord to basically drop down a level 1 outlet at each parking space in the parking area. And each of those boxes has its own meter essentially. It's like a mini sub-meter.
Is that it on the screen?
Yeah, and if you go a little lower, there's some great pictures that show, there we go. Let's run through some of those pictures. I think you can maybe cue them and then scroll through them one at a time. There we go. So it could be like on a stand like that, and they're also like linked to your smartphone, so the person would know like when their charger's done. And then the landlord can charge the person the amount of electricity they use. Let's go through a few more of these slides. They just show this, different options. So when I learned about this, it's a lot less expensive to install than a level 2.
It doesn't draw power at peak times.
It doesn't have to draw power at peak times, because I'm sure since it's linked to your phone, you could program
I
it.
would argue we need more money for smart metering.
That's a whole nother ball of wax.
No, seriously, because this probably requires it.
This does not require smart metering.
It does not?
I don't believe so. I believe that this is just sort of a system unto itself that allows the delivery of that electricity to that particular unit to be recorded in a manner whereby the landlord can extract how much to charge each individual person for their use during that time period.
This makes sense. Level 1 chargers at residential areas where you're gonna park the car for long periods of time, like overnight. So it's cheaper and it fits. So if we're gonna put level 1 chargers anywhere, I think in residential spots makes the most sense.
Yeah.
Particularly where you've already existing construction. If you're building new, then you could.
That's where my,
engineer it in,
that's
yeah.
where my point is that I don't wanna, that's what I don't wanna do. I don't wanna have to go back and 10 years from now, or even 5 years from now, as fast as this is moving, and expect that landlord, even at that point in time, to go in there and absorb all this cost, to upgrade it to where it's efficient, and then to offer the great service to the people that have, the people that are renting. And so I want to avoid that, because I know that's not going to happen. I know there's not enough there's not enough markup in that availability, and I know what's going to happen. Nothing's going to happen. I just don't want the people in the rural areas, we all have them. I have more than probably what most have, but we all have them. I don't want these people to be left behind. And so whatever I can do and whatever, this is making me feel better. But I also, Senator Kitchell, I don't want it retrofitting now, no more than I want it 5 years from now. I want it in there to where they can at least upgrade it to a point to where it's going to be viable.
Well, the issue gets generated around the priority, where in fact, this level 1, because of existing and the cost, and you don't want to crowd this out by prioritization on level 2, and maybe situations where that wouldn't be the top priority. So in some ways, I could see this could have a perverse impact on the rural settings by siphoning the priorities to level 2 and other areas, and crowd out the availability of funding for the level 1.
And where my thought process is with that is, if we are going to electrification of the state in the way that we're going, the priority is going to be, as much as on the electrical infrastructure, to make sure that that building stays in compliancy for the next 50 years. Much like, we got rid of knob and tube wiring. We got rid of the coated wiring. Now we got rid of the fuses.
So I'm a little like.
Exactly. But so, and no, I have a house right now. I have a house right now that's taken out of selling it to the first-time home buyer. This is a first-time home buyer's house all day long, but it's got knob and tube wiring. It's $15,000 to $20,000 to upgrade it to real wiring again. And so I've got 80% of the population, when there is a shortage on housing right now, that I should be able to sell that house to, but I can't because of the wiring. So I want to be as proactive as we can. I don't want to drag things over, but I want to be very mindful about how we move forward, because again, electrification is going to be the next big priority that we look at. As we've seen $2.2 billion needs of infrastructure upgrades, I want to be proactive on it versus being behind. That's my thought. And I don't want to hold something up.
Go ahead, Michelle.
So I totally agree with all of what you've said, because this issue of all of the technologies changing, even with the level 2 and level 3 chargers, there's going to be changes in technology that will drive us to have to replace that equipment over time. It's not 50-year equipment like wiring would be. And I think that maybe a pathway forward would be to not necessarily place a priority right now, but come back next year and see what the applications look like. Because the cost of a level 2 unit for a landlord to install, whether it's new construction or refurbishment, is going to be so high that you wouldn't get as much charging available to the residents as you would with this new level 1 technology. And that will change too. I know everything will change. So if we came back next year and saw what the grant rounds revealed, that might help us to understand whether this is even being taken up.
Moving target every year.
And my simple thing could be as far as to not to push it out in that way.
Yeah.
But at least make sure that building has the ability to upgrade without tearing through every wall of that building, so that at least you get it to the outside wall. They say, okay, we got it here. Now we can upgrade.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So you're suggesting keep it the way it is, have the experience 1 year, and then look at,
No, actually, I'm suggesting to take it out so that we have.
that's what I mean.
Oh, yeah, keep it the way it is, not this language.
That's right.
Get rid of green.
Get rid
And
of
then
that.
keep, yeah,
Yes,
keep existing,
yes.
with the understanding that with this new technology, it's kind of changed the view of level 2 as a, an extension cord. I don't
What's
know.
gonna happen when the car is plugged in at housing and it's all charged for 3 hours and the person leaves it in there all night?
It stops charging.
Yeah, the car's sorry.
But they lock up that spot.
Well, if it's your residence, that's not a
When
problem.
it's dedicated like it is right here, it's your parking spot, it's your charger, it's your ability. But you're right, Senator Moss, if they have a group thing out there, I could see just.
There's gonna be some place there.
Oh, my goodness gracious, there.
The guy's gonna walk out and see the car is charged and
Oh.
he can't use it, he's gonna unplug that one.
Oh,
And,
it's.
because I can, unless there's a penalty, there's going to be someone leave their cars all the time.
Yeah.
Why not?
Charge range.
Huh?
Charge range.
Oh, it'll be a new thing. You're gonna see it out there.
I don't
But
know.
there needs to be an app on a phone or something like that. It just starts blinking and it makes it so, I don't know, something needs to happen so you go out and move it.
And it looks like this, in other words, there would be probably this station available for every resident, so you don't, for overnight
That's in
charges.
this case, no, I
Yeah.
understand this one.
Right.
I'm talking about other facilities that what happens, they don't get penalized.
Well, they do, they'll charge you,
Yeah,
there's
If it's
provision,
at a multifamily.
not at no, but you're talking about at public charging, they're going to actually, it'll be very expensive.
They're
for
gonna
you to
start
run
like
your car.
$4 the
Yeah.
first minute that you miss and
Right.
all of that. So there's gonna be some incentives. And I mean, that's the type of thinking that I wanna just make sure that we're aware of. I don't, we're gonna have enough of this 20 years from now. What the hell were those guys not thinking about? Or women or whatever. They're gonna be saying that.
No, I think
So I wanna try
put it
to.
all on the men.
Yeah.
Put on you like,
Men think-
You'll be here in 20 years.
Yeah, well, I
You'll be
doubt
here
it.
in 20 years.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure when I'm in a nursing home, you'll come visit me, but anyways, so that's what I'm trying to avoid.
Well, this is interesting technology. You're probably aware of it, Andy.
Yeah, and because I think in some places it probably does make sense to do level 1. It'll be a proposal, this is a grant program, so the building owner would say, this makes more sense for us. And so I wasn't like Senator Ingles, I wasn't opposed to it, but I wanted to say it kind of made sense to do level 2. But I'm assuming they're gonna kind of do that if they have 2 applications and somebody's proposing to put in a bunch of level 2s and somebody's gonna put in just level 1s, they would prioritize it.
Whatever we do, it's gonna be
Probably.
changed rapidly anyway.
But if you put in priority has to be level 2, I'm just worried that it would
Yeah,
crowd out any consideration because the priority 2 would use.
I think I can be fine with anything that Michelle's proposed. As long, I'm happy to have the discussion that we've had and we'll look for more.
Cynthia will add it to our list. for
Right,
next
we'll look,
next
we'll
time.
look for
So
more.
I'll add it to her list.
I can, I'm happy with however you'd like it to be.
Okay.
Finish a
Yeah,
question. If the landowner charged these meters, does that get them in trouble with the not selling electricity?
So under the change that you made in the T-bill a few years ago, where it would have had the seller of electricity through an electric vehicle charging station be subject to the jurisdiction of the Public Utility Commission and the Department of Public Service, much like there was sort of the carve out for selling electricity at like campgrounds. There was a similar carve out added to statute for exclusively selling electricity at the charging station. So that made it so that, like, you know, the state having a charging station, you know, if they were to charge for it,
And this is considered a charging station?
this would be considered a charging station.
What's the difference between this and just a plug?
So electric vehicle supply equipment, I think, is defined fairly broadly, but just a plug, what is the then mechanism for someone to be charging for the use of the electricity,
They
the
just put a
kilowatt hour?
meter on it.
Would they? Like, is
Well,
that
they
a?
could, I don't know if they would.
I guess Senator Pritchett, to respond to your question, and I'm thinking sort of also that, you know, what about somebody who just wants to plug in their leaf blower, charge it up?
Or my diesel block heater.
Yeah, you use a block it or whatever. That as a person renting in that building, you're either paying for utilities on your own to the electric company or through your landlord if it's all inclusive. So I don't know that it's any different than,
Well, this wouldn't be all inclusive, because you were saying that they could charge just for the electricity pulled off of that plug.
yeah. So, but, well, this would, in this case, I think the landlord is going to have to sub-bill.
Which that's illegal,
Oh,
my
maybe.
understanding. So that was my question.
I guess in this
Did
case
we-
it's not, I mean, if they only use it for EV charging.
Yeah, so maybe if, because of the EV charging carve out, that we're allowing the sub, I just wanted to make sure that
Yeah, so
we
I
did that.
I think you were fine because it's linked to, and I can look at the statute again, it being electric vehicle supply equipment. And I think these sorts of things would definitely fall under that definition. If your issue, or you foresee the issue of someone plugging into something that is intended to be electric vehicle supply equipment,
No, that's not.
well, but if they're plugging in their like motor, their RV or something into
If somebody
this.
steal your electricity, you're gone away for the day and.
That's kind of,
Plug in,
that's why they
you know,
have the
that
little
night-
code.
This
Oh,
damn
oh,
thing.
okay. So I'm on the night shift and you're on the day shift, so I'm gonna,
That's gonna happen too.
no, but it's coded, so it's, all right.
But if you like plugged your RV in here, not to like recharge its batteries if it was an electric vehicle, I don't think that necessarily is what the intent of that language was, or that it would fall under the definition. Fall under the carve out. So it could be something that was dealt with as a grant agreement, as the conditions of the grant agreement, or something where the landlord is saying, like, you can only use this for like charging your electric vehicle. That problem is kind of avoided with the level 2 piece a little bit. No, because they don't have a different plug for level, no, they do have a different plug for level 2. So that's kind of avoided with level 2 because it's the only thing that you're gonna be able to like plug into it. So if this device, electric vehicle supply equipment, is being used to sell electricity by the kilowatt hour, is that then, and someone uses that electricity that they purchased for something other than an electric vehicle,
That's not our,
should that have been subject to the jurisdiction of the PUC?
it's not a transportation question, not that question.
So Burlington's in my district, and Burlington has snow days where people can't park on the roads and they have to park them in garages. Would these grants be eligible for public parking garages to get level 1 chargers throughout the entire facilities, or does it have to be a residential multi-unit
What's the
housing?
language for the 10 million?
Yeah, that's my question.
The language for the 10 million is for housing employers and public venues and attractions.
Public venues?
So, you know,
So public venues and attractions such as parks, state parks and access areas, downtowns, museums, and ski mountains that are available to any member of the public.
Cool.
So I think probably it would fall under subdivision C.
Just wait to get electricity up your way.
Well, I'll tell you what, the whales are gonna be thankful.
So I will get E903 with the addition of state parks and access areas, which we talked about earlier, but without this with priority placed on level 2 EDSE language to Chris and other members of JFO, so can get into that. Okay, so I think that gets you through 24. This is the bicycle and pedestrian planning integration program. As it came out of the House, it was a pilot program. You requested the word pilot be removed in a bunch of places, saying this is something that, the agency should be
Just
doing.
in practice.
Yep. And then because it's not a pilot, and also because you didn't want to report, the report, which was in subsection C, has been removed. She's 25.
Okay.
Actually, this is language, we're establishing it, but you're doing it anyway.
Well, this is a bit of a new program that we are doing, and we are fine just doing this going forward. We weren't sure what direction folks would want to take this when we got here, so we left it open, but we're fine with this change.
And section 25 originated with the agency. The next section, section 26, did not originate with the agency.
Okay.
Doing this anyway, but we. Well, this is just telling, disseminate outreach to communities in
Oh,
coordination.
you're looking at section 26.
I thought you said we were on 26.
Oh, so I think there's some confusion. 25 is what Michelle was just saying, and that language originated with the agency. Moving on to 26, this language did not
I
originate
know,
with the agency.
the House put it in, and it's like, the agency shall develop. Do you not develop outreach information now?
Yeah, we do, and we're already doing everything that's outlined here.
That's what
So
I'm
we're
saying.
telling you what to do. It makes people feel better, right?
I won't question people's motivations for
We heard testimony from the agency that this language is not. I haven't listened.
Let's drop it.
Let's take it out.
Take it out.
If you're already doing it, maybe you can do more with local motion on, well, that's pedestrian though.
That's
Maybe
the
we
next
should,
section.
local motion also does pedestrian too.
Oh, no, it's.
I'm not doing what else will come in.
Okay, so I'll delete section 26. So sections 27 through, this is all of the transportation board. So this is gonna get you from page 41 to 51, it's 10 pages. These are conforming revisions based on 2016 acts and resolves number 167, section 6, which made a change in one place in Title 19 to say that for the most part, all appeals from transportation board decisions go to the Supreme Court, but it didn't make that change in Titles 5 and Titles 9. This language is doing cleanup and making that conforming
we close
revision
this all
in
out
Titles
and
5
trying
and
to get
Titles
that.
5.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Okay,
Same language that you presented right through.
no changes to the language.
What cases go to the board other than people that want to get their tires fixed for hitting a pothole?
Lebanon law, for example.
If you go
Appeals,
to,
everybody has appeals.
Appeals to what?
Maybe land, maybe some of the
Yeah,
land
I would think that.
issues,
They're not,
commendation.
they don't do a lot of things these days, what they used to do. They don't do a lot, do they?
I thought they were fairly busy.
They are fairly busy, so any of our contractor disputes that are not settled.
Oh, yeah,
Go
okay.
to the board, any decisions by the I can't think of the name.
Compensation for condemned land, I think.
No, yeah, I don't know if that goes to the board, I think that now goes straight to court, but I was thinking
There's a
of
list up there
a
if you want.
3-member traffic committee goes to the board.
yeah, that's the commissioner
Overspill
designee.
the Southern Connector, Burlington went from 27 million to 41 million, you see that? Unbelievable. The cost
So
this
there's a
year.
lot there.
You're determined small claims or what small claims? Just dealing with roads, I see,
Yeah.
not all small. claims.
Yeah, not also.
Well, mailboxes are gated by plow trucks.
It's a municipal.
windshields.
And this is only on state highways.
I'll have to let Anthea answer that question.
The transportation board, I believe they just have for which piece?
What's that
Any of
here?
Yes, I
They do
believe
have class 2 or 3 town highways.
that's for the classifications of them.
Oh,
But if I hit a pothole on a street in Montpelier
I
and bend my ram, I can't go to the transportation board and ask for a
Go
pay.
to the town, city, right?
Yeah, I don't think that was good. I can look into it.
Well, that guy yesterday said the bicycle hit a pothole and all, he hit a pothole with bicycle.
You went over it, yeah.
what happened to a former senator, remember from Orleans?
John Rogers.
No, no, it was his wife, and she went over and this is, it was, oh God, this is 100 years ago, so forget.
How often do they do the public hearings on this? Do they do that on the state, on coordination with the agency on policy, state
Oh,
transportation?
they do, they went out and
used
did
to do
public
it.
hearings.
They've discontinued that recently. But because I think they've been very busy, the staff.
They did do a couple of years ago, they went out and had hearings around the state. The other dealer franchising, remember he talked about, that was one of the cases that they had.
That's
So
one of the,
there is-
that's the change in Title IX.
And what's this, treating this the same as the Human Services Board, and their decisions are appealed to the Supreme Court. So,
That sounds right to me.
The Secretary of Transportation makes decisions about junkyards. I thought that was a DEC. But it must be certain types of junkyards. We dealt with a junkyard in my town. We never went to the Secretary of Transportation for that.
Pretty sure through DMV, there is some junkyard regulation that occurs that is separate from the
Right.
DEC oversight.
those are not junkyards, they're people, they're in the
Otherwise-
Northeast Kingdom that have got 6
We had one
junk cars.
at Barton, and I'm just trying to think of who was up there, but I don't think it was transportation.
It wouldn't be like Gate Salvage, for example, they were,
So,
they just abandoned their car in their dooryard.
Well, or 20 or 30.
Or
yeah.
they start operating a junkyard, like we had one, we seriously had a real problem. And, God, I don't think it was transportation that was.
I think
going
when we had to try to regulate it, we had to go through DC,
Yeah.
but maybe when you're operating. under the
Officially,
DMV,
as your official junkyard as opposed to.
This guy was doing a Peugeot, he had the only Peugeot junkyard like in the whole.
Really?
East
That's
Coast.
like-
Yeah, like
That's like a
100
museum,
Peugeots.
isn't it?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
an interesting place to do it.
Well, so we're down to 52?
That'll get you to 37, page 51.
Nice and dry.
Section
Jump.
37, page 51.
Oh, the page.
But it almost gets you to page 52, because section 37 is the repeal of an entire chapter. So 1988 acts and resolves number 60 repealed one section in this chapter, and it probably should have repealed the entire chapter. So this is repealing sections 64 to 67. It'll repeal the entire chapter. It's obsolete. It was an assessment on common carriers. They got rid of the assessment, but they didn't get rid of the the administrative language related to the assessment. Check mark by it.
On premises sign.
On premises signs, this has to do with how you measure the distance between the sign and the premise, the building. If you have a road that is going up or down, something with great elevation change. So under current law, it needs to be 1,500 feet measured along the center line of the highway. This would, if the difference in elevation is more than 100 feet, allow it to be measured as a straight line to account for switchback roads.
Okay.
How many signs should be allowed for
Who
sale?
would have thought of this?
Somebody had a debate about.
Scott Rogers and AOT.
National Life, he works there.
Oh, we were.
So if you're looking for an example of a building that is far from where it might want its sign to be on a steep, hilly, windy road,
Oh,
National Life.
Well, be careful, because it's over 800 feet for a house, it's gonna go back 250.
Well, the road's already there.
in this case. All right. The house put it in,
This was an agency request.
and the house kept it.
Yep.
RBA, what else we got here?
Okay, section 39, this also originated with the agency. This is clarifying current practice around when an 1111 permit, the right-of-way permit is required. And currently it says utility installations, and we talked about the whole other, the annual permit for the utility poles, but it has language including each direct connection to the state highway stormwater system. This would be adding subsurface to clarify that it is not just drainage to like a culvert or a ditch, but it is an actual connection to the subsurface stormwater system, and a definition would be added for that. That's on lines 10 and 11. And instead of it being each direct connection, it would just be the direct connection. So if it connects in multiple places for that same permit, it would just be the one permit fee.
So it's making clear it's only related to the subsurface
Yep.
as opposed to. That's really good service.
Just text people.
I know who to talk to.
Yes,
Yeah, you're the new guy, right? You already know.
Hey, I take a pepperoni pizza, please.
20 minutes.
Okay.
He goes to look at road, tissue to put his glasses on. Jim took over.
Well, Tom's got me.
All right,
Back.
can we close that out? I think we did.
Yeah.
I don't think you have anything really on this one. Okay, so section 40, this is language that you added in the TBO last year, again, that originated with the agency last year, and this small change originated with the agency this year. This has to do with a site plan requiring access to the right of way. The language that was added through the TBO last year says that if the agency determines that a permit for the proposed site plan is required under section 1111, then the letter from the agency shall set out any conditions. They're suggesting changing it to may set out conditions to account for the fact that what about the sort of blanket conditions? Do those need to be considered? And this is just a letter and it's not the final permit, and there might be conditions that are more appropriate after further.
Yeah, we talked about that with concern that somehow people might be surprised that later in the process that there were conditions that they only became aware of later in the process as opposed to
In this letter,
in this letter.
that was a concern.
That was, I remember our discussion around that.
Yeah, so I didn't have any directions to change the language, and you jumped in before I could get to say, but this was something that there had been committee discussion about as to whether maybe there was benefit to requiring that the conditions be set out in the letter, and I think you heard from Michelle and the agency on that.
Oh, and the letter from the agency shall set out any conditions, if any, or I don't know. Our concern is, you remember the discussion.
So Senator Kitchell, on this one, we receive a site plan because we want to have very early conversations with developers. And that site plan is in all likelihood going to change when they go to the development review board. And so we may not know, I mean, we have our standard conditions and we can say to the developer, and here's the other requirements we would put upon you, and this is what the letter of intent does. So it also helps the development review board understand what the agency needs in terms of how they're gonna permit it versus the developer going straight to the DRB and then, oh, by the way, you need to go back to V-Trans, and V-Trans says that design's not gonna work for us, and then they go back to the DRB. But we don't wanna be constrained by, having language that is set in stone when we find out later they've changed their process and we have to issue a permit that is out of sync with the letter of intent.
So you still would like this language?
Yes.
I understand it's dynamic.
Okay.
Okay, so
Smuggler's Notch.
Smuggler's Notch.
No, there we go.
So the language has not changed. It still has the, and I'll go back to my yellow highlighting. It still has the increase for the civil penalties. It still has the application be both the operator and the operator's employer, unless they're the same person. Under current law, it's the operator or the operator's employer. Nothing in that has changed in the language that you see here. The only change that I made to the language was based on questions about whether or not there was a definition for single unit and combination vehicles. There wasn't, so I tried to add some clarity here. It's single frame motor vehicles that have the 40-foot in length cap, and tractor units with one or more attached trailers that have that 45 feet in total length. Michelle has seen this language. I think the agency is
I'm
fine with the
surprised
change.
a 45-footer can go through there. I mean, or 44-footer, it's surprising. That's pretty long itself. So that's the present statute, right? That's present today.
This is all new language here.
Yeah, currently it's a prohibition on commercial vehicles, which are defined to be a truck, tractor, semi-trailer combinations and truck, tractor, trailer combinations. So for example, that like large tourist bus with leaf peepers, I don't think that under the current law that would be prohibited.
I still can't believe they don't have any, they can't match up with the handheld device or something, because we're gonna have this problem every year forever.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I wonder how many years we're gonna be dealing with
We're
this.
gonna deal with it, whether you put the fine $10,000, you're gonna have those folks following, I guess, whatever they say reads on their phone, that they can go through it. It's stupid, but I don't know how we can correct this.
I think there's gonna be a software connection and,
Something, because
back
the
in.
fine's not gonna do it. I mean, I agree the fine, but that takes care of that individual. The next guy comes along, will do the same thing.
We have not checked back, but I'm concerned about civil penalties here being out of whack with other civil penalties that might be on the books. And that's my concern. I don't know whether in making these proposed amounts, you looked at that for relative.
It's not gonna make a bit of difference. It's not gonna
Well, it's
stop.
not, and also in another, we had talked about a driver, when the driver was under the, you know, instruction of the owner.
We have that.
So
That's
under,
in a different place.
that's in the recovery for emergency services, and I do have that language for you. That's
But I'm
in
wondering
section
if it
52. If you,
Right here.
you could add it here, and the thing I will just point out there is that would be changing the current law, whereas that other recovery, that's new law, and I'm only just pointing it out. I don't think there's a problem with you adding, you know, and the operator's employer, unless they are the same person, and provided that, and we can see my provided that language that I'm suggesting for the recovery language later. So that certainly could get slotted in. Would you like me to jump to that section before you close this one out?
But I don't know if we need to jump to it, it's just whether we should consider using the same language.
To the point that was raised, is I think that language actually could steer behavior, because that's gonna put employers liable for the entire cost of extracting these trucks, which could be $250,000 per incident. And that's what I think the industry might take notice and work on behalf of state governments to get the Googles, the Wazes to actually steer trucks away from that route.
Just unfortunate, they can't coordinate that with where they're driving. They must use that for all the traveling. It's just crazy. Yes, but
Yeah, I would not support the houses adding and, let's say, so the operator and the operator's employer both getting fines.
So you would want to keep it at either the operator of a vehicle who violates this subsection, or the operator's employer shall be subject to a civil penalty of, et cetera, et cetera. So preserving, changing the commercial vehicle piece, linking it to length of vehicle, but not having it be a deviation from current statute where it could be double penalties. It would be either or.
And I guess my own question now, when it's either or, who decides?
I don't know how that has been interpreted by law enforcement, whether any civil penalty
we're in big
violations.
shape, we need it.
So I was gonna say, think that we would say it's the operator's employer unless the operator is also the employer, the owner of the vehicle.
So you would want it to be, it's the employer. So that would be the employer, because unless they're the same person, you wouldn't need it. You would want it to be employer.
just so it's clear, instead of doing or, then they have, seems like then you get into a decision on.
But I thought, you know, we were talking about the employer being liable if they actually instructed the operator. That's in the other section.
Well, I assume since they're the employer, they have other recourse with their employee too.
So you take out just have it, the operators, the employer, or if they're the same person, and get rid of.
I don't think you need the same person. I think what Senator Persick is saying is the employer of the operator of a vehicle who violates this subsection shall be subject to a civil penalty of. The operator of the employee, the employer of the operator who violates shall be subject to.
Right, and if the employer is also the employee, then.
It's covered there.
It's covering both.
And I don't think anybody makes a decision on what the fine is. I don't think anybody stops and says, oh, the fine's only 1,500, I'll do it. Or the fine is 3,000, I'll do it. I don't think that's I think that's a penalty. Penalty's not gonna solve the problem. They're going through, believe me.
Or they start and they can't get out. That's the thing. They can't back out. So
Well, yeah, that's right. There's enough signs, I understand. I haven't been up there recently, but there's enough signage that tells you where, what the stipulation is, but, so I don't know about the fines are scary, but on the other, because it's gonna cost them, like you said, up to $250,000 to get it out of there, and then somebody,
And Theo or Michelle, do you know if they talked about how they derive this increase, or was it just like, oh, there's still people getting stuck, let's increase it, or it's like, let's look at other
I
fines?
think this
This
is the
originated
agency.
from the agency.
This came from the agency, and I would have to check back with subject matter experts, because I wasn't involved in the decision around the fine level.
Yeah, well, I think that we could look at other fines for other vehicular related
Right.
incidents to see if.
I'll
this-
single this one because it's not gonna make any difference. The last thing that decision is based on is how much I'm gonna pay for a fine. Well, I'll take a chance. It's only $1,500.
So what we're basically saying is the operator, unless they're the employee, it's the same person, then it would fall to the employer, the owner of the vehicle. Yeah. That's, we have to agree to that.
So say the language again. Can we hear the language, how it would be?
So I think you're gonna wanna see this language again before you close the section out, but I think it's going to say the employer of an operator of a vehicle who violates this subsection shall be subject to a civil penalty of, and then second decision point is, do you keep it at
Why don't we just say
$1,000?
the owner of a commercial? Period.
Because the owner isn't violating it, it's the operator that's violating it.
You have to say who's.
It's the vehicle can't violate a statute.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
I totally get you, and I wanted to do that at first, but I was like, no, wait, someone's driving that vehicle.
Yeah, all right. It's kind of awkward, the
Now we have
operator.
the autonomous.
I'm good with
vehicle.
that. I'm good with that language.
I think that's fine. But you want us to see it before we officially vote it out.
I
But we can,
Email it to us.
yeah, we could vote.
If you break for a little bit,
Yeah. Yeah, we could break
But another
10:30 and,
a key change that Senator Persick is proposing that I support is the House said that the operator and the employer, we're saying it's just one of those.
just
One.
really the owner
I mean,
of the
assuming the
vehicle.
employer gets the fine, they'll have a discussion with that employee
Yes.
about.
Yeah. that-
Along with the towing
Why
bill.
don't you do it? You want to
Can you-
go through?
While we take the break, also find out how this fits relative to other fines?
Yeah,
I can, and I would also just correct the record to indicate that the House didn't change the language relative to the operator and the employer. That was what the agency had proposed.
That was your decision?
and you just thought it would be. Or the-
Yes.
You
More
want to hit both of them?
Just really.
Yeah, I mean, because
It'd be tough to
They're not raising the fees on other things, so they're just gonna raise the fine.
Wait till we catch one of your trucks or your dump trucks with a long trailer.
yeah, I'm pretty sure they won't go through there. I do not want to be the employee who got stuck up there with the secretary's thinking on this.
Okay, we got that going.
Okay, so 41, I'll get you change
All right,
language on.
thank you. Yep.
Okay, so then from sections,
Michelle's texting already to have him check the
I'm
phone.
sorry to keep going on this, but the additional language 3, is that needed when 1 is being struck? Or is 1 now gonna be the 40 feet and the prohibition would apply?
yeah, so if you, the subdivision 1 is actually going to be the part that starts with single frame motor vehicles. So you see how the 1 is still
Yeah, yeah.
there, and then the 2 is struck,
So,
and then the 3 changes to 2.
so we would want, emergency vehicles that are over 40 feet for going into the notch, or it's just a violation is what we're waiving for them? They could still go there
They
to
could still
extract
go,
somebody.
And it's limited because it's, so you couldn't have your law enforcement officer in that 46-foot vehicle taking a joyride. It's for,
Training or responding,
Right, okay. Real world.
real world.
But a non-real world, like,
this also originated with the agency. I think actually,
Oh,
very
I mean,
little
we
was
had
changed
this
by the
term
House.
health challenged. It's like, the language, forget it, let's go.
Okay, let's talk about covered bridge.
okay, so sections 42 to 51 are all related
Oh,
to,
God. Are you kidding?
yeah, 42 to 51. Let's do 42 to 50. We can do that all at once. So 42 to 50 is moving language that's kind of outdated and antiquated from Title 19 to Title 23 and updating it, and just doing some cleanup language, some clarifications in section headings. But the gist of it is, and this is on the bottom of page 56, is the new section in Title 23, which is going to make this a traffic violation that would go to the Judicial Bureau, is that if the legislative body of a municipality where the covered bridge is located, or multiple municipalities, if it's located in more than one municipality, in consultation with the Agency of Transportation, can restrict the use of that covered bridge to vehicles that are within limits as to height, weight, and width. If they do that, the limitation needs to be permanently posted by the municipality with signs that conform.
That's important. It's gonna be posted, nice big letters or
Yep.
something, because a trucker can see, I mean, they know their truck is 14 and a half foot or whatever it is. So that's pretty obvious there. It isn't like the notch, you don't know what you're going through,
Where's
but
your
the bridge is there.
date elimination, what section would that go?
It's gonna be section 54.
I know it wasn't covered bridges, but.
Is there a, does it specify anything about the size of the sign on the bridge or anything?
So under current law, it does. It says that it needs to be a permanent sign of a standard size of at least 24 inches by 24 inches and with lettering not less than 3 inches high. That is cool. So that's current law. And that's part of what's kind of antiquated, because now for the most part in statute, you link to the manual of uniform traffic control devices.
Okay.
So it would need to conform with the MUTCD.
That's important when your sign is, that you can read, is not little tiny letter. We want to make sure it's visible. So there's one sign that
It's required that the sign conform with MUTCD. It needs to be approximately 100 feet from each approach to the bridge, and at intersections as may be required to enable operators of restricted vehicles to proceed by the most direct, alternate, unrestricted route.
So it's before the bridge, it's not on the bridge?
It's 100 feet before the bridge on either side and at intersections to make
So
it.
you have, you can.
Hopefully there are multiple bail
But there's nothing
options.
on the bridge itself? No
This
sign?
requires 100 feet before the bridge, not on the bridge.
To give people adequate notice.
Yeah, but wouldn't it be something to put on the bridge also? No, you can't do that. You don't want
I've seen it, but also it doesn't, it kind of hurts the historic.
to. Oh, I knew you were going to say
cover
that.
bridge, yeah, but not-
Congratulations, you did a good job this morning on the radio. Excellent job. You talked about the beta very, very well. Chicken, good job, you're up here.
Was that
Okay,
because you
go ahead.
turned down their zoning permit?
No, you fixed it.
Oh,
He did.
oh,
He's the man right there. I think they're gonna hire him instead of the fuel companies.
he's gonna go move into beta.
That's right, I think
Is
they
it
should.
emerging
There
technology?
you go.
Oh, wow.
I've been listening to him this morning, Beta should hire him. Okay, I'm sorry, go
You
right
won't even need housing.
ahead.
So that's the majority of moving that antiquated language from Title 19 to Title 23. And then the balance of it is going to be on page 60. And this is where you have the penalties for it. And this originated with the House, so this is not something that the agency suggested, but it would be changing from current law, which has those penalties at, they're very low, not more than $200 for the first offense, not more than $300 for each subsequent offense. So there are municipalities that I believe have penalties that are above this, and I don't know where the authority is for that. But this would be having a violation of that posted limit that's been established, be $1,500 if the violation results in substantially impeding the flow of traffic. Or sorry, $1,500 for the offense, $2,000 if it impedes the flow of traffic, and it would be doubled for the second or subsequent. So it is slightly lower for the impeding than smuggler's notch, but it is still quite higher than what it is in current law.
Do we have the same issue about the operator owner?
No, this is just the operation of a vehicle on a public highway in excess of the legal limits is a traffic violation. So I think it would be issued to the operator of the vehicle.
Although I think some of those box trucks that have taken out, the one in Lindenville, Linden Center.
I just want to make sure there's a good notice, because signs you can cover up with snow. And I don't know what the answer is, but I just want to make sure that signage is important on a covered bridge, because they all know the height of their trucks. Pass it and everything else.
Think about these trucks on interstates that go and get sheared right off. I mean, you know, it's not because of signage.
We're not paying attention.
You're not, you know.
Did you say this was the agency's language?
No, the Representative Shaw worked with the agency and with other portions of state government, because the agriculture department got involved, and DMV and V-Trans, and I don't know if anyone else was
Was there a
involved.
specific bridge on that one, but
I believe there was a bridge in Clarendon that had an issue. More than once, maybe.
Yes.
I think here too, the real problem is gonna be the technology providers for GPS and mapping directions. I don't know how we subpoena, how do we get Google in here to talk about how
you
they
have to say what the size of your vehicle is.
Yeah.
Or they could just put a warning.
warnings, like the routes, to not route through areas with severe height limits.
How many did we hit last year? Anybody, how many bridges were?
I didn't know any.
I don't know.
Okay, just curious.
I don't know if we would even know that because
that's
they're
our town.
local.
Yes, yes, that's right, yeah. Well, I don't have many, so it's, okay.
Did anybody hit the drawbridge?
Anybody that's your
I still think we need to look at the fines here, you know, because they seem to be linked to the other ones.
They're slightly linked, so smuggler's not just 3,000, and this one is.
I know it's a
15,000.
little, but I still not.
Senator Eagles runs into your drawbridge, I think, with his boat.
Oh, he'll be with me. No, he has a captain.
Oh, he has a
He has a
captain.
full-time crew, so he's not liable. It's the crew will be liable.
I had to rent it out to afford it.
We're talking, we're not talking about a little canoe here.
That's probably what I figured. It was like a 3-masted.
Yeah, that's right.
kind of yacht.
Okay, go right ahead. Everybody all right with this then? This covered bridge? No problems, okay.
Do you want me to close it out even with the civil penalty being where it is?
Now, if we find out it's really out of whack, we can go back to it.
Okay,
Why is it silent on owner versus the operator when the other one isn't?
I think the other one isn't because there was a decision by the legislature to have it be either or, perhaps to address the employer directing the employee to drive through the notch.
Would we not be better to be silent in the other section for that same intent?
I think if you wanted to go to the operator's employer, you definitely don't want to be silent. Because I think it would be issues.
Start there. Okay.
And the language that I'm coming back is saying it goes to the operator's employer, the owner of the.
And this is different because we don't necessarily have a specific problem with commercial vehicles. We just have problems with people hitting our covered bridges, which aren't necessarily those big trucks.
I can say that there is language in existing law that intentionally has the either or smuggler's notch. This language tracks other statutes in that it is not directing it to the operator's employer as either an alternative or as the primary penalty. Against.
No, smuggler's not.
So not just the, it depends where you are, but
Okay.
I did say where most people get stuck, I believe, is in the Cambridge section.
Okay. And then the last piece to the covered bridges before the municipal the recovery for emergency services, and I'm just pointing this out because it's not just covered bridges, liability for damages for roads. This is a very, very old statute. Some of the changes that you see, this is on page 61, is just linking to the right statutory citations. If you look in the green books, it
Wagon,
says.
cart, or carriage, huh?
And I didn't
I know
do
that, I know it's.
an
That was
update
one
on
of the last sections said boilers, as far as like, what's an boiler? I just don't even know what a boiler is, but.
And so the concern there is like, we've got this weird antiquated language, but we don't want to change it in a way that like might change the meaning of it. So I left this statute alone, except for putting the correct current statute citations and adding subsection 1434C. So this means that if there is damage to that covered bridge, then there could be a lawsuit to recover the damages.
And we want that. Towns want that.
Yeah, I think that's okay. Okay, so now we have the recovery language. It's revised slightly from Friday. You heard from Jamie on this. And this is the language that Representative Shaw got you that was different from what passed the House, which was not limited to the 3 violations that we have been talking about: smuggler's notch, covered bridges, and closed highways. So this language is different from the language you saw on Friday, and that I swapped the sections, which I hope will make it more clear that the language that is in current law that is allowing the municipality, county, or state entity that deploys the rescue services to recover them in the case of this posted road for the flooded roads, that is being repealed in section 52. But then the language that's added in section 53 includes that, because in the listing of violations on line 13, it's 1006B, that's smuggler's notch, 1112, that's the language just above for the posted closed roads, and 1434C, that's the covered bridges. And the change that you are going to see from Friday is the language that you saw on Friday said at the very end, and this is at lines 15 down to 17, may recover in civil action the cost of providing services from the operator or the operator's employer. And there was a period there on Friday. Now it says the operator or the operator's employer, provided that the operator was acting during or incidental to the operator's scope of employment. That is language that comes from Vermont Supreme Court case law on the doctrine of respondeat superior, and that is Latin for let the master answer. And it has to do with when an employer can be found.
We use that in smuggler's notch, throw in some Latin.
You could take this, provided that the operator was acting, and this is what Senator Kitchell was talking about. You could say the civil penalty is from the operator or the operator's employer, provided that the operator is acting during or incidental to the operator's scope of employment. The issue there that you're going to run into is this recovery language requires that there be a civil action, lines 14 to 15. So there's going to be like a case and a determination, and that's a much different scope than I'm an officer and I'm writing a penalty for a ticket. So that would be a reason to maybe not want to include the language in the same places. And then I think that this language, and I worked with Eric Fitzpatrick and some of the other attorneys who staff judiciary matters, is different than saying the operator or the operator's employer. If the operator told if the employer told the operator, go drive through the notch, this is broader than that because it leaves open the ability to, and one of the prongs of the test for respondeat superior is the kind of, and it's interesting hearing servant use here, is the kind of the servant employed, the work done is the kind that the servant is employed to perform, it occurs substantially within the authorized time and space limits. And then this is the key part for the argument about, well, he told me indirectly to drive through the notch, is actuated at least in part by a purpose to serve the master. So the scenario could be, you know,
Boy, this is archaic, servant master. I mean, this must be common law out of, I don't know, Elizabeth in England.
well, it is most recently a 2004 Supreme Court case that is citing all of this. But the scenario where the person who's doing the delivery, you know, they've been yelled at multiple times. They knew the only way that they were going to make that delivery on time is if they went through the notch. You know, their employer had encouraged it before. You could make those sorts of arguments in terms of the recovery being from the employer, not the operator.
I'd say close it out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Jamie's looked at the language.
Jamie's looked at it.
Talk about it.
does the committee want to take a break now, or you want to wait, or what do you want to do?
Yeah, because then we're getting into
Yeah.
sustainable, that's the
Let's,
glass,
take
right?
a,
Let's
give
So
that
we
a-
okay the section 54?
Yeah, I think that's what we're saying.
Oh, 54, can we do 54 and then take
Okay.
a break, because this is related. So
Alright.
this is what Senator Persick has been talking about how there's a report that needs to be filed not later than February 10th of each year. This would just be taking that out. It would still require the municipality to file the limitations for their posted roads. And there is still language that requires
So we
that,
had to do all this to delete not later than February 10th. I mean,
We did it.
you could get rid of lines 10 to 16, but I thought that that was helpful language to see that you could not it is unenforceable unless it's filed with the department, because there is the language that says additions or deleted can be made from time to time as required.
I think that makes sense.
So there was thought behind it as to why you need that many lines to make that one
Andy,
change.
that, you can put that on your campaign.
I have a town clerk that's very happy about it.
Yeah,
And the DMV is aware of the fact that I think this entire section can be cleaned up, and that there's weird language in there about like how much they charge for the booklet that they have to publish by the beginning of April, which they don't publish, and then they have to make quarterly updates that
Oh,
they
you
can
can put
charge
that on your
$3
list.
for. I'd love to put that on my
Yeah,
list.
yeah.
It would make me very happy to clean up that statute.
Spend your summer.
Anyway, the DMV knows that I would like to see that statute.
And Michelle, Mike Smith, the DMV said, oh, can we make sure we see the language? But the language is just striking out the date, which he said it was okay. I don't know if you're in contact with your at the DMV, I can send him an email too and just say that's all that happened. But
I had sent you just the little excerpt, I think, that you could forward to him.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Okay,
I think we can take a break.
take a break, it's a quarter up.
And I will say that the balance should go pretty quickly.
It's a lot of words to do, we want to do more.
So the sustainable building language you already talked about, and that was back in February. The only other changes that you are making to what came over from the House is instead of the written report for the charging fee, the state charging fees at charging stations has been converted to an oral report, and that is it. So everything else is what came over from the House, and for the most part, it's the addition of the sustainable building language, the oral report, and then things that originated with me in terms of just cleaning up things in statute.
Get the opportunity for these folks to put something together, if you're gonna do something before we go back.
I can make the changes that you directed me to, and I
Okay.
think that could be close to the final-ish version of the bill.
All right, take a break.
And the fines, doesn't.
Which you're waiting to hear back.
That's the thing.
I don't-
Okay, I'm stopping